Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Jean Rogalin, and I'm on the Culture Committee here at the Keller Williams Premier Property Office in Summit. And thank you so much for all taking your time out of your day to join us for this very important and very informative conversation. So today was inspired by Keller Williams International Agent Leadership Council and Gary Keller's initiative to address racial inequities, not only at Keller Williams, but in the industry at large. So we were inspired by that task force that was put together. And at the local level, Keller Williams Premier Properties, our Culture Committee, our staff, our leadership, our volunteer facilitators, all came together to put this together with the help of Guaranteed Rate sponsoring it. And most importantly, our new partnership and teamwork with the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race. So joining us, and you'll meet some of them today, are their directors, some of their executive committee, and local agents that they turn to for expertise in that market. So, you know, together we've been able to pull together what we hope will be a very exciting, informative start to the conversation that we need to have. So a couple of things I did want to point out. We do have volunteer facilitators, so please be patient with us as we go. Also, we will be going back and forth between sharing screens. So as we've all become very accustomed to Zoom meetings, you will see a little bit of that. So without any further ado, we will get our meeting started and go on to introducing Nancy Gagnier, who is the Executive Director of the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen once Jean stops sharing. Great, thank you. And here we go. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning.
I am going to get to my first slide. I'm going to jump right in. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having us. I am going to just begin with our mission, which is to build and sustain a community that's racially, culturally, and socially integrated and truly inclusive, where there's equity and equality for all. Oh, there we go. And this is what we do. We work by the guiding principle of intentional integration, and we work in all areas of community life. We work in neighborhoods, schools, community engagement, marketing, research, civic leadership, and engagement. And if you're interested in learning a lot more about us, our website is at the bottom of this screen, and I encourage you to get to know us. We do a lot of work with realtors. And why do we do that? We want to ensure that prospective homebuyers of all races are shown all available homes in all parts of our two towns. And that's been an intentional integration principle since the beginning of the organization. And we want to see that there's a trend toward integration in surrounding communities and in all of our local neighborhoods. And how did we do this? In the very beginning of the coalition, we started with some realtor testing for racial steering, and that proved to be true. We know that it happens. It happened then. It still happens a little bit here and there, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And our response was building collaborations and advisory, working with realtors so that we could have a positive outcome for prospective home buyers and meet our goal of integrated neighborhoods. Now, what I'm showing you here is demographics. This is what South Orange Maplewood looks like, what Essex County, New Jersey, and the US. This is the census or American Community Survey information. And we know, or you know, that connecting racial data with home sale transactions is barred by federal law. So all of this begs the question, does data undermine or support equitable real estate practices? We know that you can't discuss it with your clients. It could be perceived as steering if you do. And that's the realtor's dilemma, because data is good to have, information is good to have. You're always assessing locations, properties, for the ways to help you sell or provide the best services to your customer. But organizations like ours can use data in positive ways. We use it to demonstrate patterns of segregation in a city, a town, or region, inequities and outcomes, and lots of organizations use it to address fair housing and barriers to opportunity. So it's good in some ways. It can be used in ways that are not good, but we hope that you will, understand the communities that you're working in by understanding the demographic data. So here's a chart that talks about the home ownership rates. As of 2019, there was a 30% point gap between Black and white home ownership in the US, which is actually bigger than it was in 1968 when housing discrimination was still legal. The Black home ownership rate in Essex County is 27.8%, and the Black-white gap is 41%, which means it's a lot higher in Essex County than it is even across the US. And so regular people like us, we reach for those reasons. Well, it must be because of income, or single parent households, or there's already segregation in these areas, so what can we do about it? Even when you adjust for all of those factors, there's still a 17% Black-white gap that remains unexplained. And so that begs a question for us: why? What might account for the Black home ownership gap? And what I'm showing you there is a picture, a redlining map in Essex County that's from the Montclair Museum. So yes, there is a racial wealth gap, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. There is information access issues. There are housing supply challenges, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And then there are the policies and practices that make it difficult for Black households to obtain homes. Redlining, steering, racial bias, which is what we're going to get to. The information gap is a lack of understanding and information about the home buying process. We know that there's a racial wealth gap. At $171,000, the net worth of a typical white family was nearly 10 times greater than that of a Black family at $17,150. That's from 2016. Some people say that it's increased in that time. And we know that starter homes are scarce, so it makes it harder for people. There's an affordability crisis. But we believe, as we have for many years, that realtors have the opportunity to work against racial separation practices. Not in all areas, but you have a little bit of ownership. So now we want to talk about undoing structural barriers to Black home ownership. And one of those things is the Fair Housing Law, which was intended to prohibit discrimination in the sale or rental of real estate property on the basis of all those things. And then in 1983, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, it includes handicap and familial status. And it was supposed to increase minority home ownership. That was the intent. Did it work? It was outlawed. It outlawed individual explicit acts of racism or explicit racist discrimination in housing transactions, but it didn't result in an increase in home ownership. In fact, between 1950 and 1970, there was a huge jump in Black home ownership, 20%, And we haven't really gotten beyond the 1970 rate as of today. Now we want to talk a little bit about racial steering and redlining. We know that this is an important part of the getting your license and study and understanding. So we know that you know this definition. And in 1979, the Supreme Court reaffirmed this by saying that directing prospective buyers interested in equivalent properties to different areas according to race. That's what racial steering is, and it is barred by law. And redlining, a long-standing practice of preventing, making loans unavailable in neighborhoods, or making it very expensive or more difficult for low-income people to buy homes in certain neighborhoods. And that increased the wealth gap as well. So even though redlining was banned, the housing patterns created by redlining still exist today. And that makes it difficult for to increase the Black home ownership. So despite best efforts that include changes in laws, policies, and codes of ethics, some realtors intentionally or unintentionally steer clients, and we know this happens because you're probably very familiar. I hope you are, and if you aren't, I did put the link there, the 3-year Newsday investigation. And then even back in 2012, which sounds like a long time ago, but not that long ago, the HUD did a paired testing study. I think it was in a lot of markets, like maybe 61 markets where they demonstrated ongoing steering. The Newsday one is, as you know, restricted to the Long Island market. So despite the bans on discriminatory lending, modern day redlining still happens. So we know steering happens, redlining still happens. You would think that that is a practice that would be very hard to engage in, but just as recently as 2015, a bank in our own state, Hudson City Savings Bank, paid the largest settlement in the history of the U.S. Department of Justice because of being caught redlining. And the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, which we refer to as HMDA, data analysis continues to uncover unfair lending patterns and redlining trends today, and it's all over the country. So just when we think we've created enough laws and policies to create change, we find out that they're still happening. So here's the role of real estate agents. From 1924 to 1950, the Code of Ethics actually said you should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood or a character of property or occupancy members of any race or nationality, which might change or be detrimental to that neighborhood. And thank goodness today, we know that the Code of Ethics is quite different and everybody's familiar with it. And that kind of goes back to the point I made earlier about, well, what do you do about demographic data? You want to know about it, but you can't really discuss it with your clients. So even though there are these industry changes in both redlining and steering and codes of ethics, we still are facing some of these issues. Even if realtors believe that they're following the letter of the law, they still may be engaging in steering. And we know from the Long Island Newsday study, some of the things that came out of that is the use of coded language. It was one of the things that our paired testing study found in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and using conscious or unconscious assumptions about the buyers. And I will use that to lead into our next session. Why does racial steering persist despite good intentions, training, code of ethics, and legal remedies? And I'm going to stop my share.
So good morning, everyone. Morning, Audrey.
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Let
Morning.
me just get
Good
to my
morning.
good morning. So Nancy left us with the question of, with all that's going on legally and otherwise, why are we still having these huge inequities and in fact seeing them actually grow? And so I'm here to talk to you about the fact that unconscious bias contributes to the continuation of these racial inequities in real estate. When we talk about unconscious bias, so we're all on the same page, we're basically talking about the reality of social stereotypes about certain groups being formed without our awareness. We are being bombarded with so much information just in our everyday life that this is kind of a mental protection to help us kind of survive and make quick decisions. So these things are kind of running in the background and we are not consciously aware of. These biases are formed by everything around us. It could be our media, it could be things we hear, it could be things we heard from our families, and they are there even though we are not controlling them. These biases most often are applied to these major groups, race, gender, sexual preference, age, religion, ability groups, and there can be other biases, but these tend to be some of the major ones. They're actually, all biases are not the same, and we often think of biases as having a negative effect, but sometimes it can have another distorted effect. That's the word we should use. There are different kinds of biases, as you see on the screen here. Affinity bias is when you tend to gravitate toward or relate or make decisions in the favor of people who are like you. A halo effect bias means that you're not making judgment based on what's in front of you, but you're basing it on some assumptions about that particular group that you hold. And so it may again be distorted. Perception bias is the one that we most often think of when we talk about unconscious bias, and that's forming stereotypes or assumptions about an entire group. And then it somehow colors or clouds our judgment. Confirmation bias means we see what we want to see, basically. We have these notions unconsciously, and so we are aware of those things that confirm what we already think about a particular group, which may not be true. And then groupthink is that we are not taking the time to individually make a choice or a decision, but we're kind of going along with what generally is accepted in our group, whether it's our family, whether it's our industry, whether it's our office. The reality is, and this is probably the punchline of this entire presentation, we all have these biases. I think people feel somehow ashamed to think that they have biases, but the reality is that we all have them. And as with any problem or situation, you can't solve it until you acknowledge it. So we all have them, our clients have them, our fellow associates have them, we all have them. The key is becoming aware that we have them, which then gives us power to try to manage them. So unconscious bias, it's natural, it's unintended, we all have it, but that doesn't give us permission to just kind of say, oh, well, you know, that's kind of the way life is. It means that because we know that we have them, it can impact our decision making. So we need to do something about that and be aware of where it comes to play. These are some of the areas that, and as I talk about them, you'll probably recognize some of them that you may have experienced. It affects who we see. If there's a particular group, an out group, if you will, one that we are not very familiar with or that we hold in high esteem, we literally may not even see them. You know, it's like they don't even exist if they're raising their hand in a room. And not seeing them goes all the way to the extent of not being able to distinguish one person from another in that particular group, because we see them as one group. We don't see them as individuals. Attribution errors means for that particular group, whether they're in or out, we may rationalize or give explanations for what happens or doesn't happen based upon that group rather than the reality of what's right in front of us. It also affects how we respond. There's been some research done that shows that depending upon, I think this particular one I'm thinking of, used emails, and they use names, some names that are commonly associated with particular ethnic groups. And depending upon the name, people either opened or didn't open the email, responded immediately or
Okay.
didn't respond at
Yeah.
all. So I'm going to ask if
Mhm.
everybody will mute your mics. I appreciate your positive responses. So if you're not speaking, just mute your mic. It also influences body language and tone. And if you stop and think about your own experiences, that's very important in the work that you do, where you're trying to build connection and relationship with your client. Uh, Unconscious bias can prevent you from even having eye contact with the person because you're not comfortable. It can influence the way you respond, even in your voice and your tone. And finally, this is not the only impact, but the one that I'm going to mention today is that it can create racial anxiety, which is really a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fact that you feel anxious or nervous about what's going to happen, that leads into your interaction before you even start interacting with the person. So we see that these unconscious biases create situations that impact our interactions with other people. So we need to understand that they exist and better understand what we can do. Let's talk about the impact of these biases in the real estate industry. And some of these consequences can be very, very important to people. Unconscious bias can end up having people hire the wrong person. Maybe the right person for the job was someone who's not of their particular group, but because of these biases that are clouding their judgment, they weren't unable to get beyond that and to see. And so they missed a great opportunity to have a good hire, and that person missed the opportunity for a job. It can also lead to misunderstandings, which in your business, having a good rapport with your clients and having their trust uh, helps you to it makes the difference with your referrals. It makes the difference as to whether that person stays with you and whether they refer other people to you. And of course, these other areas are pretty much self-explanatory. They're unhappy, you're uncomfortable. Uh, if it's someone who's working with you or for you and you're not giving them a response based on their true performance, but based on these biases that you have, then eventually they're going to feel undervalued and maybe not do their best or maybe not even stay with you. So successfully confronting unconscious bias, as we see, how negatively it can impact us in real estate and in other industries for that matter. Addressing this issue occurs or needs to occur at multiple levels, at the business level in your industry and in your offices, and at the personal level. As we talk about the business level, it's important that your realty agency, that your office builds an inclusive culture where people can be who they are in terms of their race, in terms of their ethnicity, and not feel like they have to conform to another standard, which is typically the white majority, quite honestly. Being able to be comfortable in the way they speak, etc. Companies need to be proactive in defining their company's core value. In other words, you don't wait until something goes south, until something happens, until you have a complaint. You let people know up front as an office and as a company that this is what we stand for in our office. And also you need to make a statement, whether it's in your core values, it can be in your literature, and more importantly than making the statement, you need to live the statement. I know I have worked in a corporate environment where to read our mission, you'd think it was nirvana, we'd gone to heaven. But then when you looked at the practices that supported or did not support that value, it was just lip service. So it's more than a company just putting nice words on their brochures or saying nice things to their employees and to their clients. It's actually living that reality. This is a perfect example of what that might look like. And those of you who are with Keller Williams might recognize this statement. This is what leadership looks like in a business or an industry, starting at the very top. In this case, we've got an excerpt from a letter written by Gary Keller, where he very clearly and very boldly states from the top that the truth is that racial injustice and inequity persist. And in order to help change that, it's critical to not only say something about it, but to do something about it. The real estate community has a unique opportunity to promote healing and reform. So to hear those kinds of words come from your founder and at the top gives you a foundation, gives you support to go and make the changes. And these are the kinds of things that can be done at the business level. But many of you here today are here to talk more about the individual level. What can you do? You're thinking, what can I do to help deal with this reality of unconscious bias? The first thing you can do is to understand that there are certain conditions under which your bias runs rampant. It increases. And I smile when I look at this list because as you read it, this is your life, right? This is what you live every day. You're in an environment where there's stress, you've got time pressures running from open house to open house, different clients, you're trying to multitask, you're unclear about decision criteria, and you may not have all the information you need, and you may not have interacted with that particular group from which your client comes from. These are the conditions under which unconscious bias is actually increased. So that means that you have got to consciously work because these things are your everyday life. Things that you can do when we talk about the work personally of dealing with and managing unconscious bias. First, you need to be aware that you have it. And that gets back to the question to acknowledging that we all have it. So the issue is not about getting rid of it, but acknowledging it and upfront recognizing it and setting up practices for you as an individual that help you to manage it. You also need to challenge the negative bias. If you've got a certain bias about a particular group, consciously think about why you have that bias or acknowledge that you have it, and then try to counter it. Who do you know in that same group that totally counters that bias? So it's not a given fact that applies to the particular group. And lastly, this is a major one. I think that, and we follow this in the Community Coalition on Race, one of the things that perpetuates racism is that because we don't have personal direct interaction, we rely on third-party information or these unconscious biases. To the extent that you get to know people from other groups, then you can start to see some of these assumptions fall away, or to see the value of dealing with people as individuals rather than as a group. So accept that it exists and be intentional in managing it. See group differences. How many times have we heard, or some of us might have even said, oh, I don't see color. Well, you need to, because it's a reality of people's existence. And to deny those differences is denying part of their reality. And so we're different, but that doesn't mean there's a deficit in being different. Individuate. This is so important. Within that word, you can see individual. So rather than dealing with the person in front of you as part of a group, who is this person standing in front of you right now? And what are their needs? And what are they bringing to the particular interaction? That is so critical. And then the last item to share here is the whole idea of appreciating the circumstances of the other group. In this case, we're calling the out group, the group that you may not be most familiar with. Part of the purpose, and Nancy sharing at the beginning of this, the circumstances is that now confront Black homeowners and prospective homeowners, is to know they're not coming from the same place as some of your other clients. And so as we understand where they're coming from, it helps you to try to build a customized approach. What might they need that some of the other clients may not need? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. This is a nice little acronym that can help you remember or think of some of the things you can do. You need to pause, literally and figuratively. I mentioned earlier that when you're in a hurry, when you're stressed, when you're rushing, you're more likely to fall back on those instinctive things, those subconscious things. But when you pause, you are conscious and being more deliberate about what you're doing. So pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention, for example, if you're starting to feel a little bit nervous in this interaction. Don't try to suppress this, acknowledge that. And try to ask yourself, so what am I feeling here? Is there anything about the person in front of me that's generating that? So it requires a lot of reflection and introspection real time from you. This is interesting. The A in pause. Ask yourself, am I making the choice or the decision I'm making based on a requirement, or can I change this decision? There are some things in your transaction that are fixed, whether it be financial, what have you, but there are a lot of things that you have flexibility over. So rather than taking the easy way out, use the authority and the power that you have to make sure that this particular person in front of you is getting the best response possible. Understand that there might be other options and interpretations. So don't go to the quick and easy. This is going to require from you, I guess, a lot of self-awareness, and it's work. It's not easy. It adds another layer to what your job. But this is not just about your job. This is about life, because we're having these interactions with people, not in just in your in your position as realtors, but in everyday life, in your neighborhoods, in the schools, in every place that we interact. This is, once again, we're doing some work. Search, get the information, rather than falling back on those stereotypes, those assumptions, in order to make a good judgment, and then executing consistently to achieve inclusiveness in the real estate market. Execution consistently is critical, because as human beings, when we have a stimulus like this presentation, for example, this is going to be top of mind. But after you've gotten off of Zoom and you're out interacting with the client, what will really make the difference for you, for that client, and for the industry, if you're consistently reminding yourself of these things that we're talking about. I need to check and question my responses. Am I dealing with the person in front of me, or am I dealing with a fear or an assumption from something I heard, or the group itself? So even though as realtors and real estate agents, you have some power to manage the situation. Hopefully management also has power to change things in the office. But even though we make those changes, which are very necessary, it's still not sufficient to close this gap that we've been talking about. And so to talk more about getting more of that racial equity, we're going to have two of our members of actually our residential committee with Community Coalition on Race, and they also happen to be your peers, Camille and Estrella. And I'm going to stop sharing. And if you would just put their picture up quite quickly, Jean, and then they are going to share some information with you.
Share my screen.
Well, don't even bother, but just go to it. Let them, there they are.
Hey, how are you guys?
Before they start, I do want to say that the slides that you're seeing, in case you're writing frantically, we do plan to make all of this available to you. So you're going to be able to get information after this evening.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Estrella.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Estrella.
And we are the Brightest Shine Homes team at Keller Williams Midtown Direct in Maplewood.
We do have. So, hey, all of our fellow realtors and KW agents. And 90% of our home buyers just this year purchased with FHA loan products, as well as conventional loan products with 20% or less down, mostly less down.
A little bit about me. I'm from Brooklyn, born and raised, but I've been living in the Maplewood and South Orange community for the last 8 years, thanks to this lady.
I brought him over, obviously, from Brooklyn. I am originally from Maplewood. I've actually been here for nearly 30 years. And personally, as an African-American woman, as now a realtor, I have personally seen the shift in demographics, particularly south of Springfield Avenue in Maplewood, as well as the Boyden section.
So today, like an hourglass, we're going to start broad. Then we're going to speak about what we as realtors can do when it comes to promoting equitable practices and approaches for all of our clients, no matter their background, no matter their walk of life, and meeting them exactly where they are.
Exactly. And looking at our screen, just as Nancy stated earlier in the presentation, less wealth means less opportunity. And as seen here in this image, $352,000 is the median white family net wealth here in the state of New Jersey versus $6,100 in Black families. So right there, that's the highest gap in the United States, right here in this state. And on average, white families, and this is from 2012, white families are 5 times more likely to inherit money, which means they have greater opportunity to then purchase what we're talking about today, real estate. So we know that we're in a time of best and finals, especially in these last few weeks before school starts. And the shift of the market has literally taken us into September, We're going through, as I said, best and finals. We have some offers to submit tomorrow by 12. That means appraisals are being waived. Black and brown homeowners are being priced out without cash on hand that is more than their down payment, or gifts that could possibly be passed on to them. They're literally being priced out. So we have to, as buyer's agents, be aware of the numerous financial options that buyers have. And then if you're on the seller side, you also have to be educated about the numerous financial options that buyers are presenting to your sellers. And then that way you're able to present those offers with a greater understanding of what each of those financial options are. That way, it doesn't mean that a buyer who's coming in for a $650,000 offer, who's offering 3.5% down, it doesn't mean that they can't qualify for the home. It doesn't mean that they can't close. It doesn't mean that they're ineligible or that they can't compete with an offer that's 20% down, a conventional loan that's offering less than their $650 at $620. Right now, we actually have FHA lenders that are closing from under contract to the closing table in 21 days, 3 weeks. It's all about the products as well as the bankers that you're working with. You got to have options.
And let's be honest, just because somebody has 20% down and they're using a conventional loan does not mean that they're guaranteed to close. We all know that. Every client is different and every process is unique.
Right, definitely, definitely. And actually just 2 weeks ago, I received a phone call from a seller's agent representing, their seller. And he was transparent with me and said, look, the cash buyer that we had lost out and didn't have the cash that he said he was going to have, even with the loans, the cash being presented in his account, it was gone. So an offer that my client put in nearly 2 months ago, he came back to me saying, hey, is your buyer still interested? And yes, they were. They had been beaten out back to back to back during these best and finals. And, if they had originally gone with us, and yes, we know that there are many, many different factors. If they had gone with my buyer who was ready to go and close, they would have closed by then. So speaking of which, we'll start now by talking about the different financial options that we know of today.
All right, great. So thinking about the facts, right? In 2011, FHA homes accounted for 50% of the mortgage loans taken out by African-American borrowers. 49% of home loans issued to Hispanic and Latino Americans are FHA loans. FHA products focus on home buyers who have lower wealth, yet are credit worthy, which means they have what it takes to get the job done and end up exactly where we all want to be, at the closing table.
Definitely. So as you can see from this graph, blue representing conventional buyers, red representing FHA loans, green representing the cash buyer, and the orange line representing the VA loans. This graph actually is talking about the financing trends from 2003 to 2020, just this past Q1. And we can see that right now, the conventional loan products and FHA products are literally coming in neck and neck, just hitting about 20%, and they're splitting. And that's definitely different than what we saw back in 2007, where the conventional loan product was definitely used more than nearly 90%, as opposed to FHA loans that are just around 45%. So we see a huge change and shift in liberty of people saying, okay, I can use a conventional loan at 3% and still feel like I am saving instead of using all of my cash. That way I can use that cash to help finance my mortgage payments, my taxes. And we know we're in New Jersey, taxes are high. Mm-hmm. So it's for some buyers, it's better off for them to keep that cash because, again, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Exactly. And we understand that FHA appraisals can get a little bit sticky and a little bit murky, but both conventional loans and FHA loan products are making it to the closing table, which give Black and brown homeowners and Hispanic homeowners who are using these loan products a higher percentage, a chance to have a piece of the pie, which at the end of the day, we all deserve to build generational wealth.
Definitely. So where do we go from here? What's our job, especially as realtors? Literally, what is our obligation?
Okay, so first, We have to create bridges for our buyers, sellers, and realtors to create win-win situations. Above all else, have patience. I'll tell you, we've gone through so much back and forth between buyers and sellers. We'll give you a prime example. We have an FHA buyer who's actually a mortgage lender that made an offer. Yeah, he's amazing. He made an offer on a home that was listed for $745,000. We've been through the process for over 6 months now. We made an offer $20,000 above asking price, coming in at $765,000. We beat out all the other offers. The agent even called me and said, "Hey, why'd you offer so high?" We said, "Because we're trying to win this and we know what it takes to get to the closing table and get this closed." We get into 1 day of attorney review, and I get a call from the agent saying, "Hey, my seller wants your buyer to put 10% down." I said, "You are aware that we got this offer approved with a FHA loan, which is only 3.5% down. So why would your seller want that?" "Well, my seller just wants that." "Okay, did you do your job in educating your seller as far as what this goes?" "Yeah, but my seller just wants that." The deal fell out literally that same day because the seller refused to come down from their expectation of what they wanted, partly because of ignorance, right? They didn't know what it takes to have an FHA loan or to finance an FHA loan and to get it to the closing table. And part of that is also the realtor's responsibility to educate their seller as far as what the loan products offers, how successful they are in getting to the closing table. And now that same property has still been on the market for 3.5 weeks, which we could have closed, but they're still searching for a buyer, partly because of that ignorance. So we have to do what we can as realtors to educate our potential clients, buyers or sellers, about the loan products that are out there and how to get to the closing table, end all be all.
Definitely. So bridging the gap, especially, looking at this picture, it always reminds me of, well, it is in Maplewood, it's in Memorial Park, and I used to cross it a lot. And we need to just close that gap of misunderstanding. And also it comes to understanding complex files. When it comes to, if you're on the buyer side, your buyers, you got to meet your clients where they are. Where are they in their job type? Are they salaried? Are they 1099 self-employed? Where are they in their lives? What is it that they need to make sure that they can get to the closing table? Are they in need of grants? Are they just shy of $10,000? There are LIFT grants right now today that are now back on track, especially after the months of April when the LIFT grants were literally dwindling, that are now offering $20,000 to help assist potential home buyers right now in their journey. Also, when you're looking at, on the seller side, as a seller's agent and you're receiving an offer, check that box that said other, NACA. Do you know what a NACA, no down payment loan, looks like? Making it to the closing table. That gives someone an opportunity that could have never thought of actually owning a home. Get that opportunity. Why? Because there's a loan product that NACA has. So as a buyer's realtor, just going back to what Audrey talked about the pause, knowing that don't let that one door that's shut in your client's face prevent you from seeking what else you can do to make sure that your client gets the products that they need. Have access to different loan products, different bankers, different lenders. Why? Because that one lender might not work for that one client, but find the one that will, so that you can make it to the closing table. And I promise you, they will sing your praises till the end.
Absolutely. Which brings us to our third point, diversifying your marketing strategies. Inclusivity isn't just a catchy phrase or isn't just a catchy marketing slogan. What are you doing to make your business visible to all, right? When you go through Facebook, when you go through Instagram, whatever social media you have, when you go out into the community, are you diversifying your sphere, who you're reaching out to? Because at the end of the day, people buy where they see a mirror of themselves and of their lifestyles. So you want to make sure that you broaden your horizons and broaden your prospective clientele beyond those conscious and unconscious biases. We want to make sure that we're branding ourselves as equal and fair housing, not just to our friends, not just to our nice tight sphere, but to all.
Right. It's so real that people, they buy when they see the mirror of themselves and of their lifestyles, Lewis was saying. And one thing I really like about this picture is it's showcasing the visibility of different people, different cultures. And that's what we want to be able to do in our own business. You want to be able to diversify your team. When you look at your team, are you hiring people, reaching out across the aisle to different groups, or does everyone look like you? Are you also thinking about representation matters? Why? Because when different groups of people are represented on your team, I promise you, different people are going to start coming to your team to do business with you. Also, when you're looking at your phone and you're going through your contact list, does everybody look like you? You know, are you having conversations again with people of different groups? And also, one thing that Lewis and I began with a colleague here in South Orange and Maplewood is we began South Orange and Maplewood Entrepreneurs of Color. And we created a directory of not just realtors, but lenders, service providers, plumbers, performing arts schools here in Maplewood and South Orange. And it doesn't just benefit us, it benefits local folks. It benefits other business owners. Why? Because we wanted to create a source, not just because we want to continue to support Black-owned businesses, brown-owned businesses, but because they're doing great business. And when you are business giving, when you're business receiving, it becomes cyclical. You're going to continue to get more business from different clientele because you are reaching out again to different groups. So it's so important to make sure that you are diversifying your sphere, your scope. Everyone who you're working with should have a background that is unlike yourself.
Which brings us to our next point. Do what's right. It's our responsibility to call out conscious and unconscious biases. Even if it goes against the grain of the crowd, might make you uncomfortable, might make the situation tense. Be okay with saying, you know what, maybe I'm not the right realtor for you. And we have to fire certain clients just to break those chains, just to rework their paradigms and their mind shifts. Because at the end of the day, end all be all, a check isn't worth your morality.
Definitely. And for us, if you can see in this photo, I really love these pictures, but it's about our clients. It's about having that personable touch. Why? Because every client is different. Again, you're meeting your clients where they are, wherever they are in their walk of life. And currently, as we drive through our towns, particularly Maplewood and South Orange for us, as we drive through our state, and given what we are in nationwide in this environment in history right now, we see Black Lives Matter signs sprinkled everywhere. And if Black lives really matter for us as realtors, we need to make sure that our equitable approaches are reaching Black and brown homeowners and future homeowners. Why? Because everything begins in a home. Generational wealth begins with a home. And us as a husband and wife couple, as Bright and Shine Homes, no matter where our clients are in their life, we want to make sure that they can get to the finish line. The closing table is great, but it's that life that they actually begin when they put that key in that keyhole and put their bags down and say, this is my home. And for us, that's why we do it, because we know that everyone deserves a home. So also what we wanted to provide for everybody is this amazing resource. We want to make sure, yes, that you've taken things away, but to continue doing the work. Doing the work is so important for progression, for us to grow as realtors, for us to grow as people. And Lewis and I went to an amazing workshop at the Brooklyn Historical Society back in October 2019. And it was an amazing panel discussion talking about redlining and its repercussions. And the amazing Richard Rothstein was there, who wrote this book, The Color of Law. So I truly recommend reading it. It definitely breaks down the layers that have been just stacked upon in this country about housing, about racial discrimination. And it's essential for our work to understand, it didn't just happen overnight. No, this is systemic. This is definitely systemic. So what's amazing is that entire conversation is online. So if you do have the time, and I please implore, please listen to this conversation. You're gonna have a lot of takeaways from this conversation. It's there for you guys to listen today. And actually, if you are going to be around in September, please come to Words Bookstore. You're gonna have to actually, I think, reserve a spot. September. Richard is going to be there, and it's co-sponsored by CCR. So it's going to be a great conversation that you definitely don't want to miss, and it's coming up soon. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope that you've been able to take away chunks of information that you can apply to your current practices. But true knowledge is built through reflection in action. Right. And we're looking forward to the breakout groups and building and growing together, because at the end of the day, the more we know, the more we grow as a collective.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Well, I have to say thank you to Nancy, Audrey, Camille, and Luis. It was great information that you shared with us. And Camille, I think at that end, what resonated is that everyone does deserve a home. So thank you for all that information. And I think it's going to be terrific what we all share in the breakout rooms, and really get all these steps started. And before we go into the breakout rooms, there is somebody behind the scenes, Jackie Marcano. So she'll hopefully pop on here sometime. But she's putting you into breakout rooms with facilitators. And I'm going to hand this over now to Audrey, and she is going to go over some of the breakout room instructions, as they've done a number of these town hall meetings. So
Thank you so much, Jean. And we want to go through this quickly because we don't want to take even 1 minute away from your time together. This is actually where a lot of the magic, I say, happens when you get a chance to internalize what you've heard, when you get a chance to exchange ideas. And we invite you to be candid. Everyone who's on this call, with the exception of the presenters, will be pre-assigned to a group. And Jackie is doing that in the background on our behalf. Each group will have at least one and possibly two facilitators. We're trying to keep the groups down small enough that you'll be able to have a conversation and not just feel like you're going, through a list. You'll be in your group. We're hoping for about 15 or 20 minutes. And at the end of that time, or near the end of that time, there will be a warning at the top of the screen. And so we remind the facilitators to check your screen for when that warning comes. That warning will let you know that you will be coming out of your group. And when you're in a breakout group, you'll only see the faces of the people in your group. So it makes it much more of an intimate setting, and you can kind of see people's faces and body language and talk to one another. After you return to the group, we're going to ask your facilitator to share some of the highlights, some of the main thoughts, questions, trends that you had in your group. While we're in the breakout groups, we ask that everyone please turn your camera on. I believe as I looked across the screens, we had 100% of that, so thank you for that. When you go into if you'll go to the next slide, Jean, in your breakout groups, we have some universal ground rules that we have found make for a smooth, equitable conversation. Everybody will be given a chance to speak, but you also have the right to pass. There's no problem with that. If for some reason you haven't formulated your thought or would prefer not to speak, that's perfectly acceptable. We ask that everybody listen to what's being said by the person speaking without interrupting, even though it may spark something in you, to kind of hold that until you have an opportunity to actually be asked to weigh in. Speak for yourself and your experience as opposed to a third party who's not in the room. Because if people have questions about what's being said or why, they don't have the opportunity to probe that. So keep it to your own point of view. Be candid, but also be respectful. And privacy is what we have created for you. Everything said in the breakout group stays in the breakout group. Although we're recording the general session, we are not recording the breakout groups. So you can feel that only the people on your screen in your group will be sharing information. And we ask people not to take screenshots as well, so that the privacy is maintained there. Recognize before we go in that not everybody's going to have the same perspective. That's the value of having these conversations, so we can share and challenge ourselves and educate one another. And I think that's pretty much it. So that being said, it's going to feel a little bit like magic. Jackie is going to press the breakout button, and at that time you will be in a smaller grouping with just the faces of people in your group. Before you go into that, if you pull up the next screen, these are the questions we're going to ask you to think about. All of us have mentioned the whole concept or the necessity of reflecting. And so this whole exercise is intended to help you go a little bit deeper with what you've heard and really internalize it to be thinking about what it means to you. So the first question we're going to ask you to share in your group is to share with the group what really struck a chord with you, what resonated with you personally, and share why, if you can, very briefly. And then people in your group will be able to respond to what you've said or ask a question that will be completed for everyone in your group. The second question we want to ask is really get down to the basics in business. For you to talk about what you are going to do, making up a public statement. And you know, when you speak an affirmation, the probability of it happening is very much increased. So to say out loud what thing you are going to do differently as a result of what you've heard today. So those are the two questions that your facilitator will be stepping you through. And now I think we're ready to go into our breakout groups. Before we do, I just want to say that we've tried to divide the groups up equally. For the facilitators, there may be two of you in the same group. If so, if you guys can decide which of you will lead the discussion or help the discussion flow and who will be the scribe, that would be helpful. And so, Jackie, if we're ready, let's go into our groups. Have a great discussion, guys, and we'll see you in the plenary session.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, just like magic. Welcome, welcome. We see smiles on faces, so we hope that means that you had a productive discussion, the beginning, because we can't emphasize enough how this is just the beginning of what we hope will be an enriching experience where you continue to self-educate, to have conversations with each other about this very important topic. I don't even know if we need to share the screen. This is the point where we're actually going to do what we call highlights. And in some of your breakout groups, you had two facilitators. I'm not sure who those were, but I will be calling names of some of the facilitators. If there are two of you in the same room, you can decide who wants to lead and the other can add if they choose to. Needless to say, we have 20 groups, which is wonderful. But it also means that we have to manage our time well. So we're going to ask you if you would share no more than 2 highlights. So not everything that you talked about, but of the things that came up in your room, of the actions people decided they wanted to take, of the questions people might have, if you would share no more than 1 of 2 of those points when I call the name of the facilitator. And I don't know who's doubled up, so I may call, if I call your name and you'll say, well, maybe I'll see you when you come on the screen, we'll see. So everybody's back now, Jackie?
We have about 31 people so far. People are still
yeah,
coming
we got quite a few, okay. We'll wait for everybody to come back at the same time. While we're waiting, Nancy, now might be a time we can take advantage to share. There was a thing or two that you had hoped to share before from your slide, and when people are coming back quickly. So you wanted to share?
Sure. Let me take this moment while we wait for everyone to come back in. I gave you a lot of information, and really one of the things I wanted to emphasize is the work that the Community Coalition on Race does with realtors. I had a slide in the beginning and neglected to give you some of the details. We've, over 20 years, we've provided marketing support for realtors. We have brochures and other resources. And in fact, right now we're developing a targeted marketing website specifically to reach prospective Black home buyers. And these are things that we hope that realtors will take advantage of. Other promotional materials, some printed things. We work with realtors with an advisory committee to develop selling points. We've provided tours for realtors. We provide tours for prospective home buyers from residents, provided by residents, who can discuss things that realtors can't discuss with clients. And many of those residents over the years have purchased homes. And in fact, if you look at a recent Soma Living magazine, an interracial couple that's on the cover, the first line of their bio says that we took a tour with the Community Coalition on Race. We also have something we call Coffee and Conversations with Realtors, and we bring leaders in the community to provide some of the information about schools, zoning, ordinances, all sorts of issues that are of concern to realtors and prospective home buyers.
Thank you so much.
We
So,
hope you'll reach out to us for those things.
okay, great. So now we're going to do a little, almost like a little speed dating as we have you guys share the things that came up in your session. And I'm going to ask if Laurie Silver Carcello, if you would, please mute your mic until your name is called. So Laurie, we have you with us?
Here I am.
Great. Were you in the room alone, or was there another facilitator with you?
Just me.
Okay, great. So would you just share very quickly some of the things discussed, or thoughts or feelings that came up for your group?
Yeah, it was really great. I wish we had more time.
Yes.
So a few of the things of the things that resonated with our group was one of the participants said they did not like the term intentional integration, and we talked a little bit about that. Another was, I think, opened their eyes to finding that color blindness is not a good thing. I think everybody was sort of just struck by the generational wealth aspect and just the crazy disparity in New Jersey, especially of Black versus white wealth, and just the inequality overall in all of the processes. So it was really, I would love to figure out how we could continue this conversation.
Thank you so much. And as we talk, there's going to be overlap, that we expect that. So if your group has come up with the same key ideas, just briefly mention it and go to those things that may be unique. Let me go now to Laura Rebocio Brockway. Laura, you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Our group also was surprised by the gap in the numbers of home ownership. And I think we talked more about recognizing the biases, and really that it is a two-way street. It's about recognizing our own biases, and then the people that we connect with, and how we can bridge that gap. And I think, growing into our own comfort level, and making other people comfortable with us as much as being comfortable with others. And I think that about sums it up.
Barbara Lewis, can you now share with us from your group?
Yes. Hi, everyone. We had a great group. Thank you for all the participants. We spoke about agents understanding the financial products that Lewis and Camille mentioned, so thank you guys so much for that. We thought we all had a lot of work to do and learning to do, and understanding the unconscious biases. Another great point was changing core values. One of our members spoke about stating their core values and making sure to incorporate some of the ideas that were presented in her mission. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's move now to Hope Chernoff.
Hi, Audrey. Thank you.
Hi.
I'm going to pass the baton to Marisa O'Brien, who was a co-facilitator, and she scribed.
Excellent. Marisa.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, really, we spoke a lot about the big gap as well, and about how generational wealth begins with owning a home. And I think we all really agreed that education is a big piece of it. We want to educate ourselves, and also, listen harder, and there was an idea about getting more Black people into home ownership by doing specific things that would increase the sphere of Black clientele. So attending things like Zooms that are, going to have people that you could connect with that would, you can help get into home ownership. There was also an idea that came up that was surprising but anyway, an interesting idea about that Black people don't trust other Black people with finances or to be a fiduciary. It's maybe like an underlying thing. really. I never knew about it, but it was interesting. So we need more education is a big takeaway.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to Shannon Aronson.
So I was in the same group with Barbara Lewis, and she was the scribe. So we're
okay.
covered.
Wonderful. Okay. Maria Saj.
Hi there.
Hi.
I was in the same room with the same facilitator as Bridget, but I was a scribe, so I will go ahead and just give you a couple of things that we talked about that have not been mentioned. One of the questions that came up is in the current market conditions, understanding the loan products, yes, but when sellers are asking us to waive appraisals or the appraisal question, it sort of highlighted when somebody is putting down less money, then how do you overcome that? So we didn't come up with answers, but it was just a conversation. And one of our members also talked or really advocated or encouraged us to read Raise for Profit and to really get behind that mortgage and understand the financial piece of it and how that plays in.
Great, thank you. Let's move now to Diane Curry. Diane, were you in the room alone? Was there another facilitator with you?
No, just me.
Okay, great.
Okay, so also just along the same lines as what everybody else was talking about coded language. We can't believe one of our takeaways was when you spoke about the 30-point gap between blacks and whites, that it's worse now than it was in 1968. We were talking about how that was, quite alarming, and can't believe that, 60 years later, we're in, if not a worse part than a situation than we're in now. We talked about how we can get to real change and what do we do to get to the point when we can really help facilitate real change. And we also talked about examples that some of our participants have had that have made them uncomfortable, whether it's, discussions with landlords not wanting to rent to a certain minority, or having a client that's asking you not to show your home to certain people. So we talked about examples like that and how it affected them and how that made them feel, and how we can, go forward and really, those participants were saying how they just, told the clients that, that's not the way I work, and I'm not going to be working with you. So that's really what we talked about. It was a great conversation.
Great, thank you. Kara Moxley. Kara?
I'm muted. Hi there.
No
yes.
worries. Was there someone
yes.
in the room with you?
Yes, and it was Lee Smith, and he is going to touch on the first question, and I have the action steps. So I'll actually reverse that and talk about the action steps, which were re-examining a mission statement, using it as an opportunity to reach new groups and expand their sphere, even in COVID. The qualification process and getting leads, in the process of getting leads, paying as much intentional focus intentionally to the lower price leads in areas that you may not be as comfortable with, and maybe pay out less of a commission. Being thoughtful in talking to sellers about the nuances of selecting offers and discrimination, and from the market center perspective, doing education trainings on that, and also on FHA and dispelling some of the characterizations of FHAs that are negative, turning that into a positive. And then we had a suggestion to read the book that was just mentioned, Raise for Profit, as well as Color of Law. And Lee?
Wonderful.
Yeah, a lot of what we discussed in the first question has already been covered, but sort of the recognition that unconscious bias, all the different kinds of bias, is pretty ubiquitous, and that we can't be colorblind. We shouldn't be colorblind, but we should understand what the implications of those biases are in our interactions. We also, I think one person was, and I'll admit I was surprised as well, at how recent the Hudson City case was, 2012.
15.
I haven't read any of those books, but I kind of know the history of like Baltimore and redlining, but that's gone back generations now. It's still happening. And then just sort of seeking first to understand better, and this has also been covered, but really partnering up with lenders to really understand these different products and why a seller shouldn't be quite as concerned in the ways that may bias the selection of an offer when they're looking at multiple offers. Or in the
Excellent.
case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's move now to Carrie Lavelle.
Hi.
Hi.
I was in a room with Scott Schumann. I think, Scott, were you taking detailed notes?
I took some notes, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So we talked a lot about the lending programs as well, and you know, I think the conversation that came up was, are we going further enough to make sure that our clients know all the things that are out there? You know, we have these trusted partners in our businesses, and we give them to them and hope that they're going to do the best thing for them. But do they know all the things out there? And then taking it a step further, we're an attorney state, and a lot of times the realtors and the clients get an idea hammered out, and then one attorney says, oh, that's a bad idea. That's low money down, or that's a loan program I'm unfamiliar with, and that derails everything. So it's that education all the way through the process that really needs to happen in order to make effective change. That was a big conversation. And the other part was just venturing out of that whole conversation we had about looking at your clients and the people in your contact list. Do they all look like you, or are they representative of different groups? And really branching out and making sure we're connecting with others outside of our circle.
Thank you so much. Let's go now to Vanessa Pollock.
Hi, so
Hi.
Susan Devaney and I were together. Susan was taking notes. Do you want to jump in, or shall I?
You can go ahead, Vanessa.
Okay. Just echoing what we've heard in terms of education every step of the way, and really helping to educate our sellers to understand the possible loans and FHA versus conventional, and really to flip that, much like Kara said, about the benefits of the FHA loan to them. And then we also talked about advocacy. So it's educate, advocate, and add to our business directories and vendor lists that we're putting out in our home buyer guides and our seller guides to our clients.
Excellent. I want to acknowledge that I know that you guys, many of you have very tight appointments, and we had hoped to finish by 11:30. We're not, it's 11:35 now. We'd like to finish, but as many of you who can stay with us, please do. And we do ask that you take a few minutes, 3 minutes to be exact, to finish the evaluation that we have at the end. So if you can stay with us, we'll quickly go through, and let's go now to Ron Cartazone.
How we doing? So yeah, we have a lot of overlaps here since so many people have spoken. So I think we need maybe a market center class on the different loan vehicles and stuff. And I think we have some people that would step up to the plate on that. We did talk about the staggering surprise of the income divide, the fact that despite all these laws that were put in place years ago, like nothing's changed. We talked specifically about that story about the demand for the 10% down from that seller. And that's, I think, where we really need to educate our sellers, that like Vanessa was just talking about, because that's basically, it's almost like the seller steering, the neighborhood as opposed to, and then out of that came a rental conversation, and somebody is actually blocking out the names on the rental applications when they give it to the landlord. So they're basing their decision on the qualifications and not the actual name of the person, which could be revealing,
Yeah.
So that was actually interesting, and it was suggested that you don't do that selectively, you do that as a blanket policy.
Okay.
So I think that wraps it up.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Brad Knox.
Yes. So we had a pretty nice conversation about unconscious bias, and one of the participants was talking about how growing up we're only getting little pieces of the puzzle. We're getting a piece of a puzzle. Oh, this group of people are like this. This group of people are like this. And then when we meet someone, we only have that perspective of what we've learned. but really not looking at it as a 50-piece puzzle, but more of a 1,000-piece puzzle. You know, don't just look at someone by what you've heard, but take into you have to take into consideration the whole person and not just what you know. And I think as a result from this, I think people are really gonna talk more about it with people, being more open. We have to be more comfortable about being open about unconscious bias, become more involved in the community, and as it pertains to our own career, diversify our teams as much as possible to kind of combat this. So it was a very good conversation, and it was a little bit short, but and I was by myself, so.
Oh, okay.
Who's
Thank
next?
you for that, Brad. Mark Evans, Mortelli.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mortelliti? Sorry.
That's it. Like the pasta. Yes, so similar to what everyone has said, we covered a lot about how it felt more comfortable to talk about bias, unconscious bias, and if we actually take away the judgment and the shame that we possess it, we can actually be more productive in living with it and moving through that. And everything that Luis and Camille said was wonderful, and literally all of it resonated, so thank you. And then what are we going to do? Stay better informed on all of the options of the financial products available, and learn more about the laws that are out there. And how do we individuate? I loved that word, and it really resonated with the whole group, and best serve our clients on an individual level, as opposed to approaching it of like, this is my service and this is what I'm going to give you. No, let's meet clients where they're at and figure out how to best serve them. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you. Marianne Slam.
So I was with Laura Brockway, but the one thing that we talked about that I thought was interesting is that I think we need to get to know each other in our offices. I mean, we're all doing different businesses, even though we're different market centers. You know, the market center serves as a spoke for lots of different towns. And I think there's a lot we can learn just from getting to know our fellow agents and how they're serving their clients and understanding their products. And I think that was a big part of our discussion, as well as just knowing who we are in our office.
Thank you for that. Abby Tinser.
Hi, I was with Susan Massa also. She was going to address the first question. I was going to address the second. I could start with what two things we're going to do differently as today's session. We also talked a lot about the loan programs and, you know, how we could help build wealth amongst the community. I think that was the biggest takeaway that came out of this. We did say that there are programs out there. One of the women told us about where if you have no down payment, there's grants out there to help with the down payment so people could start to build wealth in the homeowners process. So we all talked about educating ourselves more on that to help people buy homes.
I was with Abby, and it was a great group. And one thing that was interesting in the first question is that it was the unbiased condition that we all have, and how are we going to deal with that? And the one thing that also came up in the conversation is that we have to understand our clients, and we have to increase our sphere and understand what their needs are and ask them many, many questions. Thank you.
Audrey, you're muted.
I apologize for that. Ashley Boyle.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to start by saying how wonderful my group members were and how authentic the conversation was, and how grateful I am for that. And how grateful I am for how much I learned from them. So I want to just start working backwards from question 2, what we'll do differently. First is when we see something wrong, calling it out professionally and respectfully. Second is continuing to do things by the book, that rules are there for a reason, and to just continuously improve. And also to educate ourselves in a different way, to do that digging deeper, that extra homework that is so necessary right now. You know, going to meetup groups, just doing things like this to keep these conversations going, to keep this understanding going. And so there was a lot that was shared, and it was from those beautiful personal perspectives, personal experiences, and there were instances of discrimination shared, and not just based on race, but even based on age or the shade of one's skin. You know, being expected that if you're this shade of your race, that you act this way, and that that there's even, you know, not just systemic racism, white versus black or black versus white, but also black versus black, and so on and so forth. And just how to address those challenges as a realtor in a way that is, I don't know what the word is, but how to, as was just previously shared, understand your clients, because sometimes they'll ask questions that are uncomfortable and that are difficult to answer as a realtor impartially. So that is where the work of education and having these conversations more and more often will be absolutely essential.
Thank you, Ashley. Was there another facilitator in the room with you?
It was just myself.
Okay, let's move on to Peggy Brugg.
Yes, so I was in the room by myself as the facilitator. We had a great discussion, and I think we echoed what has been said. What's critical is that we need to start with the premise that everyone deserves a home. And if we start there and we educate ourselves about the continuum of achieving that, we will get where we want to go. So that is education, that's understanding unconscious bias from the sellers, from the buyers, from the mortgage, from everybody involved in the process, and making some of these things more mandatory, you know, because we're not going to change it just by having this moment. It's really about changing as part of a movement. So, you know, everybody really talked about everyone deserves a home. Everybody was kind of surprised by the wealth gap, but willing to learn. And that's saying people are willing to learn, and we're willing to deal with where we are so we can move to where we need to go so that people can achieve their dream.
Thank you. Not a moment, but a movement. And the last person I have facilitator-wise is Tanya Moon.
Hi.
Tanya?
Yes.
Hi.
I had a small group, but we did cover, I felt like we covered a lot of topics. Certainly owning up to all of us have biases that we carry day in and day out. Bias and prejudice is a little bit different than racism, where racism would also embody some power positions where it can really, you know, effectively block people out of an opportunity. But so we talked about that. We talked about biases that are even found inwardly within our own race, how we pick someone that is going to perhaps even like sell our house. If they're the same group, sometimes people are thinking that that's not the right person to effectively sell their house within their own group, the prejudices. There's just so many objections that can come up just from just different people's ways of thinking. So there's a lot of change that needs to be made with regard to real estate, because it's really at the core of how Black families especially can really change their projection as far as wealth. We talked about knowing more about FHA, so we could explain that to our seller clients to let them know that FHA is effective, is just as good, and to be able to effectively put that message across, we have to know more about FHA so we can feel confident in having those conversations. But we also talked about in terms of changing our ways of handling business. When we do get a client that maybe speaks a different language, maybe speaks Spanish, they ask us if we speak Spanish, and if we don't speak Spanish, we kind of leave the conversation there. Why are we doing that? You know, this is an underserved population. Everyone needs service. This is what we're in the business to do. We're in the business to help people, and we need to be mindful of that. Refer them to someone that can help them, and that's helping at the same time. So there's just different things that we have to, on a day-by-day basis, be mindful of, so we can really make a difference in people's lives, in people's future. So we have to do better.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Tanya. Is there any facilitator still on the call that we have not yet asked to share from their group? Okay, great. Thank you, guys. You obviously had very fruitful conversations, and we thank the facilitators for your time and being trained and doing a great job in keeping the conversation flowing and sharing highlights. And I'm seeing comments come up in the chat. I just want to remind you, I believe we had 127 people, counting facilitators, who joined us today, and 80 of us are still here, which says a lot. I'm going to ask if Jean can share the screen as we try to wrap up for today.
Excuse me, will we have a chance to ask questions?
Those people who want to stay. I know we had said we were going to end at 11:30. Some people have been putting questions in the chat. If you want to ask a question live, I know I'm here to stay. Nancy's here to stay. I'm not sure about Luis and Camille. They're nodding yes.
Because I'm in the Manhattan Market Center. My name is Jamela Swift. I'm actually surprised about how many of you all are unaware of the wealth gap. I'm confused as to how so many people did not know about that. And then also, I mean, is any type of historical context being provided to explain to agents why there is a wealth gap in the first place? I mean, because when we do these town halls, especially with the white agents, historical context is very important. And I'm hearing everyone talking about schooling sellers, but the agents themselves have to be educated on why there's a significant wealth gap between the white and the Black community. I mean, we have to talk about slavery, how Africans were enslaved for several centuries, which leads to why so many in the Black community are broke or poor. But also keep in mind that not everyone that is Black is poor. There are a lot of affluent Black people in this country. We also have to talk about Jim Crow and systemic racism. So when we do this, we have to provide education for agents too. I had to share that.
I hear you, Jamila. And your point's well taken. Your point's well taken. I also, 90 minutes is, we could have spent 90 minutes on one of the 3 topics we tried to cover. So your point's well taken. And, making assumptions is never a good place to start. We tried to lay a foundation of some of the legalities that have helped to perpetuate even post-slavery to keep this gap perpetuated and actually increasing. I don't know if Nancy wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I hear you. I am all about the history and learning and trying to get people to understand that history. And we've done this, of course, today we were trying to provide a very general, some very general information, and we did provide some about the racial wealth gap. But we were really trying to get to Camille and Luis to provide the practical approaches that realtors can take now. We did, as part of our ongoing 1619 project discussions in our community, we had a presentation on the racial wealth gap. I think it's still available on our website. And for that very same reason, we do encourage you to attend the Richard Rothstein Color of Law presentation. I know he talks about that. We like to talk about it. We think it's important information that history is critical to people's, how deeply they get the disparities. So thank you for bringing that up.
And Jamila, I appreciate you raising it because this whole call, this whole process was initiated by the Culture Committee, and they're looking to find out what is needed. So your question is just an opportunity for more information to be provided. So thank you for that. And it
Well,
is
I
not.
have to thank you all for doing this, but one thing that I constantly say in my market center is the last thing that I want from all of these discussions is a feeling of charity towards, I mean, we are a very proud, honorable community, and it is an honor to be Black. So I want people to walk away with nothing but the utmost respect for us. And the last thing is we want is to be pitied. So I just have to convey that too. So thank you.
I would like to
have a quick question. I have to run a quick question for Nancy. Is there a counterpart in Middlesex County of your organization, of the Community on Coalition?
No, there are some other state groups. A lot of local communities reach out to us to work on these things. Most of them are very focused right now on dealing just generally with anti-racist training and policies, but not to the extent that we do it. But we work with other communities, consult. So if you want to send somebody our way, we're happy to talk to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you all. This was amazing.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is maybe just put something out there so that we can then leave some time for some Q&A, because we do have people that do need to sign off.
Yeah.
Jamila, thank you for your questions and your points. And this is a segue to what I'm about to put into the chat, which is our survey. So points like that you have made, it would be really vital for us if you would share that, because today was a start of the conversation. This is not a one and done. We're going to continue this. So the more input that you give us, the way that we can improve and create a louder message, we would really appreciate that. So if I could quickly do some thank yous, and then I can leave it to the Q&A and get out of the way. I do, first of all, want to thank all of you who hung in there. And that's amazing. Give yourselves a round of applause, because that's a long time. Great conversation that clearly a lot of us want to have more to say and more to share. I want to thank our facilitators. So well done. Now you're not rookies anymore. Also, Jackie behind the scenes, you're unbelievable.
Thank you, Jackie.
Then also, we do have sponsors, as I mentioned in the beginning, Guaranteed Rate. They're not aware of it right now, but they will be presenting to us all of the different options in financing. And two, any information. What I loved is how much we're all sharing in the chat. Everybody was giving each other resources and a pat on the back, and this is amazing. So obviously, Keller Williams, our office, and the Culture Committee, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing to get this going. And Keller Williams Realty International for getting our offices to get this conversation started. And then finally, and most importantly, is our presenters and I think our new partners over at the Coalition for Race with Nancy and Audrey and Camille and Luis. Thank you so much for your presentation and the information that you shared. Okay,
Thank you so much for having us.
Fill out that survey, and I'll get out of the way in the Q&A.
So your gifts back to us, your gift of appreciation will be taking 3 minutes to give us your true feedback. Comments like Jamila had, thoughts that we can then build on to do an even better job in the future. So I think we're going to be pulling up the next slide, has the link.
Yes, and we did put the link in the chat, but I will bring that up on the screen.
And you guys have a great and productive day, and remember to continue reflecting and doing your part.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks. Do you need me to stay?
No, Nancy, you can go ahead. You know,
Okay.
I always like to sit and keep people
I know.
company while they're filling out their
I do too, but
evaluations.
I keep getting
No worries.
phone calls, so.
I'll talk to you later. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye.
Okay,
Thank you,
bye.
everyone, for your support and help. That was really, really great. I'm looking forward to, deepening the conversation, correcting some of the things that need to be corrected, and even just from the start, sharing what we've done. here today. I think it was really great work.
Yeah, our first step.
Excellent.
All right, have a great day, everyone.
All right,
Thank you, Nancy. We still have 20 people who are logged in right now. I'm hoping and assuming that those people are completing this survey, and we'll just keep you company.
If anybody has any questions,
I posted something in the notes, and maybe it's something for us to think about going forward, because this was a South Orange Maplewood focus because of the coalition, but the representation of Blacks in most of the communities that most of the agents in our market center work in is tiny.
Oh yeah.
Compared to the representation in South Orange, Maplewood, West Orange, Montclair.
I hear you. And we have
part of it is the wealth hurdle, that the entry-level housing in most of those communities is out of that range. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be showing houses in Chatham and Summit to Black families.
Exactly.
We just have to, part of it is, and the federal government seems to be trying to undercut this, the lack of entry-level housing because of lack of subsidized housing and things like that. But
well, I would hope that each of the offices would ask yourselves the questions: why and how can we diversify agents in our office? And that the answer to that may be different for each office, but the key is to start asking those hard questions and then being willing to look head on at the answers that you get and take some action.
Right.
Are there fewer Black agents who are actually identifying to link to your office? If that's the case, why?
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's 16 of us still left. Let's see who else is still here. Okay, people, I can see you're looking down.
Okay,
That's good.
I'm leaving now. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
So Audrey, I guess just to piggyback on the point Jamila made, I think that the book specifically that gives context to the wealth gap is that Color of the Law.
Yes.
Because it lays out how that systemic deprivation of homeownership was initiated and then perpetuated for the years that followed segregation and Jim Crow law. So it gives context to those questions.
GI Bill also, the post-war, what happened, who was available to get loans and education and things like that. Yeah. Thank you for that. The two books, Race for Profit and The Color of Law came up. And some of the things that were in our chat, I hope that when we do our follow-up thank you, we'll be able to include that as well, so people have that as a resource, because people shared so generously.
Just wanted to tag on to that, what Luis said regarding the color of law. I think it's important also to make sure that those resources are within the market centers. And I'm speaking because I'm a Keller Williams agent, but I think that that's super important, during the onboarding process, because if it's just a voluntary thing, if it's voluntary, they have to go to Amazon to get it. It's not likely that they're going to actually go pick up that book. But if we introduce that into our market centers, and although we can't make it mandatory as independent contractors, we can strongly suggest it.
Right. That's an excellent suggestion.
Just a quick note, if you have Kindle Unlimited, which is $10 a month, that book is free on Amazon. So.
Beautiful, thank you.
So the books that we had, it was Race for Profit, and what was the other one?
The Color of Law. Color of Law.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 13 of us left. 8 of those would be those of us who are not presenters.
Okay, I'm signing off, everyone. Thank you.
Okay,
for
great.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. All right. Have a great one.
Jackie, thank you so much. If you need to sign off, you can just leave the link up as well. Not everybody likes to sit and hold hands. I'm a hand holder, so.
It's okay, no worries.
Okay.
Audrey, Jean, thank you so much. This was excellent, enlightening, and the start of great conversations and understanding.
Thank you. You said the operative word, start. We appreciate that.
And Louise and Camille, thank you also for your fabulous presentation. Personally, I'd like to get to know you better. We're around. All right, cool. And we're not too far apart. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks.